Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast. Welcome to episode 37, Polynesian Dreams Part 2. We'll be taking you back in the conclusion of our Polynesian episode, going way back to the design, history, and grand opening of the Polynesian Resort. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me, as always, Mr. JT Kuzier from Ohio. How you doing tonight?
Doing good, Todd. How are you?
Good. Watching those Olympics?
Oh, yeah, every night.
Yeah.
Got the Olympic channel going, 4K, the whole deal. It's awesome.
Woo! Got the 4K, too. There's more commercials than Olympics, but we won't get into that.
Yes.
All right, and also from the city of brotherly love is Mr. Brian P. Miles. How's it going tonight, Brian?
Greetings from Pennsylvania, the bicentennial state.
And you just got back from Florida.
That I did. Our license plate said the bicentennial state for 1976.
How many names do they have? I feel like I heard
Why don't you mind your business over there?
Careful there, Ohio.
Yeah.
They,
We're your
they
friend
will.
to the west. Be nice.
That is true. You're absolutely true.
Brian is starting his own a vlog series called Fun with License Plates. That will be out in the next couple of years.
Yes, I am fresh back from a day and a half, or an evening and a day, at the Walt Disney World Resort, where I got to see the Hall of Presidents as it's redone, and got to experience the Circle of Life film in the Land Pavilion one last time.
Touch and felt some wall carpet?
Yeah, and then I tried one of those pastry cream-filled cronuts, which I do not recommend. So
okay.
Stick with the traditional cronut.
Oh, yeah.
Fair enough.
There's my snap response. And I got to watch the Super Bowl with Hal Bowers.
There we go.
Vacation in St. Pete Beach. And as you know, my team beat your team, Todd.
Yeah, that's true. And we'll take it. And congratulations to those Philadelphia fans out there. Well earned.
Wow, that's nice of you. I didn't expect that.
We got 5 in the back pocket. We don't need.
How's Philadelphia? Is it still burning, Brian?
There were only a couple of things that burned, but if you watch the media, you'd think there was nothing left of it. But actually, it was a jovial celebration by 2 million of the Eagles' closest friends. And,
that's right.
All told, people in the city that day and night, no real problems.
Good.
All right, and anchoring this show, with no pun intended, with some waves crashing upon the shore on a sandy beach out in St. Pete, Mr. Hal Bowers. How's it going tonight, Hal?
Aloha, Todd and everyone. It's going really good.
And you have interesting sports news from down there, right? Tampa's actually going to be playing in Tampa. So it's no longer the St. Pete Tampa Bay Rays. It'll actually be
Tampa Bay is actually like St. Pete, Clearwater, and Tampa, the city proper. So, and actually, that's not even set in stone yet.
That's true.
They have decided they would like to play in the city of Tampa, but they have to come up with like $800 million in order to build a stadium, which will likely be $1 billion when it's all said and done, because the initial design has an open top and they'd like a retractable stadium. So someone has to we just have to mysteriously come up with $1 billion now in order to do this. So
to move 10 miles from a stadium that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, so I know it's an unpopular stadium, and they certainly have plans to do things they would tear down the current stadium and build them a brand new one with a bunch of other amenities too here if they choose to say that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's, as always, the owners are probably trying to pit one city against the other to get the best deal for them, not necessarily the people that live here.
And just to round out the sports news from all 4 states that we're from, JT, good game last night. The Cavaliers taking out the Celtics.
We're back finally.
You're back after that massive
We got a squad again. Got rid of your old boy Isaiah Thomas. He's done.
That's right. All right, cue the ESPN theme. We're done. All right, well, it is time for comments and corrections, as we always go back and take a look at things that we may have gotten incorrectly or some comments that came in. So, Hal, we've got one from a little extra information about Future Core and where all those members of the band came from.
Yes, thanks to Ben West for sending this in. And also, I have to say, I apparently spent the last podcast calling them the Future Corps instead of the Future Core, which I don't know if I thought they were a band of zombies that played instruments or what the deal was.
It was a metaphor for Epcot Center.
Yeah, my apologies. So Ben said, it was great to hear you guys talk about Future Core. As a band nerd, Future Core was a can't miss attraction for every time we were in Epcot. The players changed fairly frequently, and nearly all of them had also marched in Drum Corps International, which is a competitive marching league for people 21 and younger that holds competitions across the United States every summer. So that's very cool. So I guess the group grew out of this larger organization. And as we said, he says Future World's repertoire was very jazzy. A lot of their tunes were the same arrangements played by the Concord Blue Devils, who were an 18-time champions, and they were renowned for their jazz-based shows. So thanks for sending that in, Ben. That really, I think, helps sort of round things out for us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ben, for sending that in. And I think we're going to go right to the mailbag. JT, you've got that mailbag's been getting heavy this month. It really hit us hard. And what do we got in it?
Yes, the mailbag was pretty full. We had a good turnout, I think, on the last episode. So lots of messages, comments, lots of good stuff. But first one I have here pulled is from Paul Giordano. He says, we were at Walt Disney World a few weeks ago and remembered a show in Epcot called Backstage Magic. Have we ever discussed this or found a video of that show? He searched online but cannot find a recording of this show or the first version. Backstage Magic at Epcot. Anybody know about that?
I think all of us, well, I know Hal and you and I both saw Backstage Magic, which was...
I saw it too.
You did see it as well?
Yep.
Which was in Communicore East, correct, Hal?
Let's see. Epcot's upside down, so... north. Hang on. This always confuses. This always throws me off. So,
East,
yes, Communicore East.
Near the Energy Exchange. It was
yes, the origin with Epcot always being upside down that throws me for a loop for whatever reason.
Yes.
So yes, it is Communicore East. In fact, it's the very first part where you walk into Epcot right now, where the guest services is.
Yep.
Was the former location of the Sperry Univac section, where Smart One was, and the computer coaster, and you would get access to go up and see Backstage Magic.
So we're going to talk about Backstage Magic in more detail probably in the future when we do some more in-depth Communicore episodes. But it replaced the Astuta Computer Review, and it was known for Pepper's Ghost projection of this woman walking. It was a woman, if I recall correctly, the host, and she would walk through, quote unquote, via holographic projection, Pepper's Ghost, through the computer systems there at Epcot, and you would see how it ran, and they would show you that these are all the computers that are running, the shows, and it's the central operations. And this, as we found out too, it was the actual systems, but we found out from different interviews and different books and stuff that actually created quite a bit of problems of having everything centralized, and a lot of it has been since broken out and run in its appropriate locations because of just the massive amount of cabling and everything that was needed. But how that ran to, when did that run to? It shut down prior to Communicore changing over to Interventions, correct?
Actually, I think it ran right until Interventions came in.
It did, okay.
From what I recall, yeah.
Now,
so when they closed Spaceship Earth, there was kind of like this trickle down thing. So they closed Earth Station to make that a much more elaborate post show for Spaceship Earth. And then when that happened, then guest services had to move out of the back of Spaceship Earth at Earth Station, and then they kind of took over that previous spot, and that sort of rearranged everything. So I think that actually happened just prior to the Interventions makeover. I think that opened first out of everything that was going on with Interventions.
Gotcha. And there's
the most memorable thing about the attraction, if people aren't quite sure what we're talking about, was that you would be there to watch a show on the screen, and then eventually the screen would open up and it would reveal the computer system that runs Epcot.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
yeah,
So it was secret, like a secret backstage tour, kind of like
but more or less. But it was, that was the cool thing everybody talked about after seeing it, was that like the thing would lift up or spread apart. I forget what it is, and you'd suddenly be staring at, and these are the computers that run Epcot Center. Yeah.
So what's there now? Is like, I know you just said, but like, is it like anything in that wall, or they just wall it up and hide it?
Well, there's rumor that so one of the things that they unveiled during the presentation was a model of Epcot, and it was the original model that was there for the for a Studio Computer. I think was still there for Backstage Magic, and it was kind of up in the top of the theater in front of you, and there's rumor to this day that it's still up there, but I don't know what is left of the theater. I mean, obviously that space probably still has some computers in it. That's where the Some of All Thrills, was that over there on that side?
That is exactly where that ended up, is right at Some of All Thrills. In fact, I think they ended up reusing the old, like, sort of the walkway to get up to be able to get on Some of All Thrills, or was definitely in that same location. Yeah, my understanding is over the course of time, it's like the size of the computers, of course, have gotten smaller and smaller. So that is still, a functional space where they have some computer stuff there, and, it's basically like a giant office that they run the park out of.
Yep.
But it's it's not as elaborate as it used to be.
Exactly.
And of course, my favorite thing was they had a audio animatronic Mr. Eggs there that they would use as part of the show to demonstrate how the computers ran AA figures. So
I forgot about that part. Yeah.
The computers that you saw had those, what are they? Those discs? Those, like, they look like records.
A tape.
They look
giant. They had giant. I'm trying to think of what they call them, but yeah, they were basically like 12-inch like hard drives that you could drop into the top.
Right.
Really?
You physically handled them to put them onto the platters, basically, that played them. But the reason, it's terrible, I'm looking now and I'll come up with it before the end of the episode, but there was a movie filmed in 1983, I want to say it was, where...
that was called Daryl.
That's right, yes.
D-A-R-Y-L, where they actually run through that room, and so there were movie scenes filmed there in that computer scene room, so you can still see it as it was.
Oh, okay, Daryl. All right. Well, thank you, Paul. It's very, very... Wow, I learned a lot on that one. Okay. Good.
And we're just scratching the surface. We will do a very full...
I'm going to go get Daryl now.
Go over of that, yeah.
That's probably... Is it just a horrible movie and that's the only scene I'm interested in, or...
No, it's kind of like a modern-day Pinocchio, and I think...
Through the computer system of Epcot. That's
right. And Michael McKean's in it, I think, from Laverne and Shirley and many other things. So
right. It's 1985 it was made. And it was filmed at Pinewood Studios in Orlando, Florida, and in Dillsboro, North Carolina.
All right, Daryl. Okay. We'll link that IMDb on the website when we post the show notes, I'm sure. Yes. All right, Paul. So your time's up. Good work. Good question, Paul. Thank you. Next up is from Brent. Brent is the creative director of Super 78. He just wanted to let us know that he sent us some pictures. Actually, did you guys see these?
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, he's on a legit jungle cruise. And what's he doing there? He's actually like filming something, right? Like location shooting type thing.
I think they're doing some location scouting, yeah.
Okay, and he just wanted
a future project.
Yeah, he was going to tell us that they're just kind of binge listening to the show, and it was just really cool to hear from somebody like that out, where they kind of listen to the show. Do you guys agree? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, we've actually, so Brett is the host of the Seasons Past podcast, and we've referenced his podcast several times. He's done a lot of great interviews with Tony Baxter and Tom Delaney, and they just did another recent one with Tony Baxter and and Tom K. Morris together, which was fantastic. So I encourage all the listeners to go find the podcast and listen to it, because he does some fantastic interviews. Totally worth your time. Just the stuff with Tony Baxter was absolutely mind-blowing.
All right, so thank you, Brent, and enjoy your trip there. That's pretty crazy looking. You never catch me out there, but that's neat. Our next message is from Kurt D. Phillips. Kurt sent us a solid load of pictures here from the Polynesian. Did you guys get a look at these things? The folder, the ephemera, awesome. the notepad, the envelope, just legit. It looks just like Howe's shirt, actually. I'd like to see him write a letter.
If he needs to get that shirt pressed, just so you know, how if you want it cleaned and pressed, it's $1.50. But you'll save 50 cents if you just get it pressed. So, make sure you keep some spills off of that shirt. And this was the valet service from 79.
That's awesome. And on a similar note, just I don't have the name of the person. I could dig it up here when we post the pictures. We got those contemporary resort ones too going. Like it had like the room dial controls. The guy from the Facebook group posted those. He said we could share those. Had the we talked about this too. It had the pager system and the teletype Brian was schooling me on the whole system.
You could get a typewriter sent to your room. They had 2 different pager services you could buy, and you could
the telex.
The telex number if you needed to receive or send a telex while you were there, which was the precursor to the fax machine. Foreign language translation. Don't forget that one. That was a service offered too.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me, all this old stuff. So you look at this old ephemera, which we'll post it all, and we have a lot posted now, but it just kind of blows my mind, the stuff that used to be offered. Now it seems like you can barely get help with your Magic Band, let alone,
translation and directions and everything else is just on your phone now.
Yeah, that's true.
It's amazing that these are services that are now just accustomed, you're carrying in your pocket.
All right, so lots of good stuff we got this month. So if you want to get on the show, potentially share something with us, podcast at retrowdw.com. Send us a message on there. You can send us tweets. You can reach out to us just about any possible way you can find us. We will potentially get it and potentially put you on the show. So, or you can leave us a voicemail. I think we got 1 or 2, maybe. Did we get 1? I feel like we got 1. I don't remember.
Nope, nothing.
All right. Well, where can they send us a voicemail, Todd?
They can send it to 978-71-RETRO. You got 3 minutes to leave your message, and we'll get you on the air.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, it's time for this month's Audio Rewind. Now, last month, be honest with me, guys. Did you get it before the answers started coming in? Because we only got a few answers this month.
I don't even remember what last month's was.
Did you get it, Hal?
I did get it.
You did know.
Oh. I'm a nerd. So
yeah. All right. So in the spirit of Danny Kaye in the opening, grand opening celebration of Epcot, he sang a song about what Epcot wasn't. After you take a listen to last month's Audio Rewind, we're going to tell you everything that this rewind wasn't. All right, so what wasn't that Audio Rewind? Well, we had a lot of guesses come in, and these are the things that it's not. We had a lot of guesses for the Japan Epcot Pavilion, a number of them for Reflections of China, the background loop in the Polynesian, and this was a good one. If you had wings, because of some of the Asian scenes, and I would have even thought somebody would have thought Dream Flight as well. However, I think we stumped a lot of you. It was actually from World of Motion in the rickshaw scene. So it was a tough one. So maybe we'll make this month a little easier. But we do have a winner. Congratulations to Daniel Smay. You'll be receiving the Eyes and Ears from 1975. And before we get into this month's Audio Rewind, we need to add a prize. So, in the spirit of the Olympics, guys, we have a grand opening medal. It says the dawn of a new Disney era. It comes in a nice little opening card here with a circle cut out. The medal's kind of attached. tape has given away over the years. So we're going to be giving that away if you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind.
You could fly to a plaza where the people play at a Mexican fiesta in that land of Ole.
All right, if you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind, send your guesses to podcast@retrodwdw.com. All entries must be received by March 12th, 2018. One random winner from all guesses will be chosen to win this month's prize. And with that, we need something for the big prize pot. JT, you got the list so far. What do we got in there?
I do have the list. All right, for the first item in the prize pot, we had some Epcot posters. The next thing we had was the retro WDW embroidered hat, and also it was a McFarkle's Christmas card.
That's right. And this month, we're going to add in, again, keeping in the spirit of the Olympics here, this is a grand opening, big token metal. Let's see, what's the size on this thing? It's pretty large. It's got a diameter of about over 2.5 inches.
Whoa.
Weighs a good couple ounces. Has official opening Epcot Center 1982 with the logo, and it has all of the 6 original pavilion logos of Future World and then World Showcase with some banners on it as well. So we'll be including that in the prize pot for June. So
the cost of shipping just went up on the prize pot, let me tell you, folks.
Just for that one piece. So all entries that are received between January and June of 2018 will be entered into the drawing for the prize pot, no matter if the answers are correct or not. So good luck, and once again, send your entries to podcast@retrodwdw.com. All right, so last month we started our journey through Polynesian Dreams in Polynesian Dreams Part 1, and this month we're going to be going over into Part 2. So just as a recap, last month we talked about the history and some of the original design concepts of the Polynesian Resort, and now we're going to get into what it was like after it opened, all post-construction, some of the different services and things that were offered in the early years, a lot of our own personal memories, and I know that a lot of you out there have your personal memories, because I will say in the past 35, 40 days since Part 1 has been out there, it has been our most listened to episode in just a short period of time. Easily over 5,000 listens just as tonight as we're recording that. And that's beat the pants off a couple of our previous episodes for such a short period of time. So thank you for listening. I know we've hit a chord with everybody, and I think a lot of people really enjoyed this episode. So we're looking forward to making Part 2 is just as exciting. So without further ado, again, the master of ceremonies for our luau this evening is Mr. Hal Bowers.
All right. Well, I have one correction to make from last month to just kick things off. Because remember we were talking about the rapid pace of construction and how they started in like March or something, and they were actually open by September.
Correct, right.
And I was going through some documents on this one, and I discovered that they actually opened only half of the resort on September 1st.
Oh.
So everything on the east side was open, but the west side, including Bali High, was not scheduled to get finished until November 15th. So I thought that was interesting, because I assumed the information that I had seen up until this point was that, like, oh, it all opened, and so that I guess they were still working on it for another month.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, we've got some clarification.
Yeah. So, anyways, so let's get down to the nitty gritty here. So
yeah.
So one of the things that I think I want to try to let everybody know about is sort of what the design intent of the hotel was, because I think that's one of the things that's as time has gone on, it's gotten kind of confusing. You know, you look at developments like Aulani, which are, you know, super duper Hawaiian, and, you know, very enriched with like the local culture and that stuff, and then you've got, you know, the Polynesian, which is a themed resort, but isn't necessarily to that level. So, you know, what was your take on it, Todd? You've stayed there several times, right?
Oh, many times over the years, yeah, and you know, a lot of it goes back to my original thought processes that a lot of this came out of the tiki culture of the 60s and 70s, and some of it was I don't want to say forced, but adding palms and dark woods and the design and the motif, gave that South Seas flair to it, and throwing in the music and everything like that. But it's such a unique property, and I don't think anybody's ever really tried to replicate it. I mean, I know the Lowe's Pacific, over at Universal tries to be that, but it has a much more contemporary Polynesian feel to it. So yeah, it's one of my favorites. I think also too, what people really, really like about it is it's a very calming, relaxed atmosphere, the way that it's set up with the longhouses at 90-degree angles to each other. It's very difficult to look across and see things, and it really gives a very close-knit feel to it. I haven't been to Polynesia, real Polynesia, to see if that's how they put their built longhouses together, or arrange them. But yeah, it's always been one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, so I think you really touched on some of the core principles there. So it's not really trying to be like an exact duplication of any one Polynesian thing, or it's not an authentic thing. It's a very modern hotel that happens to be Polynesian themed, and that was always kind of the concept.
And you made a great point there, because if you look across the way now at the Grand Floridian, it's trying to be something, right? It's trying to be one of the grand hotels that were on the Florida coast. It's representing what Flagler built. It's representing the Del Coronado out on the beaches of California, out in San Diego. It's trying to be something, and all the other resorts are on there. There's Bane Dog coming into the background. All the other resorts at Disney, are really trying hard to immerse you in a belief, but as that has more substantial background to it.
Right. I'm really in New Orleans. Right. I'm at the Port Orleans Resort.
And I'm in the Caribbean beach because it's painted in pastels. Yeah. So in the Caribbean. So I think that's part of the mystique of this, is that, as you point out, it's not supposed to be something, and it just pulls you in a much different way.
Yeah. So I thought this is interesting. So I have this document from 1971 called An Introduction to the Resort Division of Walt Disney World. Sounds absolutely fascinating, and I know, but this is what it has to say about the Polynesian Resort. This is how it describes it. Nestled in the luxuriant landscaping of the southern shores of the South Seas Lagoon. I'm sorry, let me try that again. Nestled in the luxuriant landscaping of the southern shores of the South Seas Lagoon is the Polynesian Village Resort Hotel. Maui, the god of vacations, slows down the sun to make the days longer so our guests may enjoy the slower-paced, more casual atmosphere of this delightful South Seas resort. So I think that's really what they're trying to do. It's funny. It's like, although it is a very high-end feel, it's like they were trying to give it more of a sense of casualness, versus the contemporary. So that way, there's a point of differentiation between the two. Although they were both very modern, but I thought that was kind of cool that they sort of framed that up for the people that were working there. That's what this document was made for. So people that were joining the resort division could sort of get a feel of what everything was.
And if you line the three resorts up that at opening, you had the very formal, clean, 90-degree angle, contemporary. You had the laid-back Polynesian, and then you had Fort Wilderness, where it was even more laid back and anything goes with nature.
Right, very rustic.
Very, very rustic. So really, you can see what they're doing there is they're creating three different atmospheres.
Yeah. And to the point of it being Hawaiian, it's like, I know a lot of people really think today of the Polynesian resort being, Hawaiian.
Right.
But if you look at the names around the resort, especially back then when it opened, it was really trying to be Polynesian, but it actually had a little bit of a slight emphasis on Tahiti. So the waters just offshore the resort are called Papite Bay, which is a very famous bay, like in Tahiti, like the capital there. And the menu in the Papite Bay Veranda restaurant spells out the intent quite clearly. It says, "The enchantment of the South Seas, Fiji, Samoa, Hawaii, Bora Bora, Tonga, and of course Tahiti is yours to enjoy here in Walt Disney World. Many tropical adventures await you at the Polynesian Village, from the thrill of joining 40 natives riding an outrigger canoe over the lagoon, to setting a casual course for two on a catamaran, water fun abounds. Or, if you prefer, simply relax on the beach or beside the coral blue swimming pool. The Tahitians have a phrase, At eta pae e teha'a, which means there will be another day tomorrow, just like today. So relax and enjoy your stay at the Polynesian village. So that's a very lengthy way to basically say not to worry. So that was sort of the original Hakuna Matata.
Yeah.
But that phrase was actually in very large letters at the bottom of the menu. So it wasn't an aloha. It's like this was more of a Tahitian feel. So I think that's just kind of an important, a philosophy that they had at the beginning. Now, as time went on, in the 90s, they actually did bring over a general manager from Hawaii to take over the resort to try to give it more of a authentic feel. And they brought staff over from I think, Maui and other places to actually work there. And maybe that's where sort of the Hawaiian idea ended up coming in.
You had the infiltration of Lilo and Stitch as well.
Today, sure.
You know, so you got some IP properties coming in, change that, and sure Moana, but Moana is more South Seas flavor than it is Hawaiian. So maybe a little more of the roots there. It's funny that you mentioned this because I never personally felt that it was Hawaii. I always felt because, to me, the masks and everything, and having visited New Zealand before and seeing the Maori culture and all that in the islands in that area, I always felt it was more South Seas, but I guess I picked up on it.
Good, yeah. Hey, well then it worked.
It worked.
Perfect. All right. So let's talk about the grand opening celebration because I think this is pretty crazy. And I know, JT, you're interested in this in particular. So
yes.
So the Polynesian Village celebrated its grand opening on October 24th, 1971, as part of the Walt Disney World 3-day press event. So I'm going to describe the evening to you and see if you can put yourself there. So they started with cocktails around the pool at 6 p.m. And at the end of the hour, a conch shell was blown. So to gather everybody in a group over in the sandy beach in front of the Tonga Longhouse. They handed out Mai Tais to the press and the distinguished guest. Ooh. And then they started,
I'm up for that.
Who was there any distinguished guests that we know?
So I'm sure it was probably, I don't think it was celebrity. Well, yeah, so like Bob Hope would have been there, and the people that were there at the opening for the rest of the celebration.
Oh, okay.
So like Arthur Fiedler and Glenn Campbell and all those.
Campbell.
Yeah.
So, I love it. Did he come for full speed up on a speedboat?
Probably. He just wandered in. Out of the
woods. maybe Nunes was testing the water slide too. You never know. Just like he did at Fort Wilderness, right?
Yeah.
It comes bounding down.
There were golfers there too.
Well, and we do have a story a little bit later on, if we can get in this episode, but we do have a Nunes story about him coming in on a wave. So stay tuned.
That's true. So then they had their appetizers. So they had spring rolls, fried shrimp, rumaki, opihi.
I think that's the poo-poo platter. Hal.
Yeah. Opihi is a Hawaiian shellfish delicacy, which apparently is very expensive now. It maybe not have been as bad back then, but it's quite pricey. And of course, everybody's favorite poi. For dinner, guests had a platter of luau pig, chicken with almonds, lychee duck, snow peas and water chestnuts, and barbecue pork fried rice.
Wow.
So then they had a torch lighting ceremony to kick off the evening's entertainment. And then by outrigger canoe, a king arrived. So I want to see if you guys could think in 1971 what king might have been part of the presentation.
So this is an actual king.
Yes.
King Stefan.
An excellent guess, JT. You're in the ballpark.
He wasn't from Zamunda, was he?
No.
King Arthur of the British.
No, good. Also a good guess. So the king was King Leonidas from the movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which had
was my next guess.
Yeah. So he arrived on outrigger canoe with the cast of the Kauai Pono Polynesian Review. They had a full show, exactly like you would have gotten from the had you gone to the luau later on. That was kind of like their first one that they did. Including the fire knife dance. And then for dessert, they had a Goddess Pele flaming diamond head pineapple.
Whoa.
Which sounds fancy as hell. Oh, but that's not all. So following all of this, that's not enough. was the debut of the electrical water pageant, which I know that we've talked about before.
Right.
On the invitation that was described as an imaginary delight of fanciful creatures and serpents of the deep on parade.
Whoa. And again, that was only supposed to last pretty much that night.
That night, yeah, that was done just for that thing.
That's what chicken wire and some 15-watt
Some
bulbs
Christmas
can get you.
lights, yeah.
And here it is.
So I'm just curious. We talked to that one guy like years ago who did the whole history on it. Did it look like overly different that night than it does now? Like, was it much smaller light bulbs or simpler or?
No, I mean most of a few of the things are the same. There've been a couple of tweaks to some of the designs over the years, and
I think now they're using more LED technology than they are with the old 15-watt Christmas bulbs, because I mean the amount of power you need to move those to get those things to light,
Sure.
the batteries and stuff.
But no, I mean it was very much the same thing, just barges and chicken wire and fencing and some C9 bulbs. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of it. It's so simple and so cool. And then the evening ended with the first Fantasy in the Sky fireworks spectacular. And as we have heard, it's like the fireworks launched off of the islands in the Seven Seas Lagoon at that point, and also off of the barges from the electrical water pageant. And there were also balloons and some like ultralight aircraft and some other crazy stuff in there too.
Can you just imagine King Triton with his Triton, just like, that thing going out and fireworks coming off the barges and stuff?
Well,
octopuses exploding,
That would be cool. But even then, Todd, they actually ended with the Stars and Stripes.
They did, okay.
The American fan. I mean, that was the national.
All right, I want some spinning fireworks then. I want those
You should.
screamers.
You should have them.
Yeah.
So that ceremony was the entire ceremony was actually developed by Disney legend Bob Yanni, and you know how he loves End with America. Like everything show had End with America.
He's like Sam the Eagle for Disney.
Yeah. And if you want to see some of this, you can. It actually showed up on the television special with Glenn Campbell that we talked about in episode 30 on the Primetime Specials, and it's also in our restored copy of the film The Magic of Walt Disney World on the website. So we should put links to that out so people can see them. So let's see. All right, so let's talk about how you actually got to the hotel, because I found this really strange and fascinating. Today we're used to just kind of like drive up and talk to the guard and try to talk your way in, but at 19...
Nobody does that. Nobody does that. We all have reservations.
Yeah.
It's not an ideal parking location.
Yeah. Now in 1971 it was totally different. So if you were staying at the resort, you would drive up to those 2 lanes in the Auto Plaza, and when you stopped and asked for directions, the attendant would take down your name and a description of your vehicle, and they would radio it ahead to the hotel, so that way they would anticipate your arrival. So when you pulled up in the valet section, they would actually know who you were, like by name, greet you by your name, and then a valet and a like the valet, like the room service. What do you call that? A bellboy.
Concierge, yeah.
So like a bellboy and a concierge would actually be assigned to you and would take you through like the rest of the check-in process and take you right up to your room.
This is like magic bands before magic bands. I mean, how cool is that? What an experience, though,
Yeah, and apparently they did this for everyone. Up for the first couple of years until they just realized it was like way too time consuming and way too expensive.
So they still do that for concierge level guests at the Grand Floridian. So that $900 a night is worth it if you want that kind of greeting.
It's worth a good $50, I'd say.
Yeah. Today, I guess I'm just happy to get a plastic lei or something like that when I walk up. That's right. Just fine.
Now, there's an interesting thing. Did that change since you just brought that up? Was it always chintzy, cheap leis when you walked in, or did they ever, up the ante when they first started?
That is actually a great question, because I know for many years they actually had fresh leis flown in on a daily basis for you to purchase.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, I know you can, when we checked in back in September, it was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday, so we actually requested an actual flower lei, and they handmade one for her, and they made it there. There's a woman, I guess, that one of the women that works there makes them now upon request. So kind of a cool little fact. No charge. It was really neat for them to
really
do. Yeah.
Wow, I mean that is a time-consuming process.
Yeah,
too,
so. It was beautiful. It was really
cool.
Nice.
That's awesome. So your initial view of the hotel was very much like it is today. After leaving the valet area and walking up to the lobby, you see a bunch of lush greenery and the small waterfalls on the left and right, and you go over that little bridge over the water. It really transports you, to the South Seas, and I think it gives you that sense of escapism right away. So then, back then, it's like you had to push through these like regular large glass doors because
coming through.
There was no automatic doors back then. There was like 2 doors on each side, not a big one in the middle. So you just had to put your back into it and get your luggage through somehow.
We have a great piece of film from that too. It's called The Vacation Wonderland at Walt Disney World. We'll put a link in there. And it actually you can kind of see the cameraman in the reflection on the doors busting through as he comes up. And also too that it says that the exotic sights will be found at the exotic Polynesian resort. So
it's so true. Yeah. Because once you bust open those doors, it's like then you got to see the lobby's dominant and most fondly remembered feature, which is the large 2-story waterfall. That was right there in the center, which is now, sadly gone, but was quite spectacular in its day.
There was a waterfall there?
The smell is gone, too.
Yes, that smell, man. That's legit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found a copy of National Future Farmer magazine from 1987, and they interviewed a man named Lars Pertwee, who is from the UK, but he was in charge of taking care of the plants inside there. Wow. And he talked about the fact that they had over 75 different plant species on that waterfall at one time, including 15 orchid plants and something called a Kentia palm, which is a slow-growing palm, because I guess if you had one that grew too fast, it would go straight through the roof. And he said that thing at the time was... he estimated that it was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because it was such a rare specimen.
Wow.
So I hope they didn't just toss that out when it was all said and done.
Now, do you guys remember the birds that were perched in there too? There was, I believe, maybe a cockatoo or I don't know my birds. There was some sort of parrot and other birds perched. I remember.
Yeah, there were over the course of time through the 80s and then the 90s, there were cockatoos and then also macaws.
Yes, that's it.
In there, which that's another one of those really funny things because those birds are all from South America. They're not from Polynesia at all. So I don't know why they ended up in there, but they were fixtures of that lobby for years and people loved them.
Yep.
And I mean, they were there, at least for a decade or so. A very, fondly remembered part of that.
Yeah, put them in there. Nobody knows the difference.
Yeah. So the plants and the bedding were actually changed out on a monthly basis. So another plant that you'd see everywhere at that time was bamboo. And there's this apocryphal story that they bought miles and miles of these thick bamboo poles that they imported for use in the lobby. And you can see it covers the walls in areas. There's low parts of the lower part of the ceiling, like when you walk in before it opens up. There's these really, and you'll see it in the movie if you go look at the movie. There's these huge sort of like light fixture things that hung above you in sort of like this cross and diamond pattern.
Yeah.
Giant pieces of bamboo. And by the registration desks, there were these valances made out of bamboo to conceal the lighting. Well, the story goes that within just a couple of months of the resort opening, all that bamboo dried out and cracked. So it all had to come down and be replaced by artificial bamboo. Now, over the years, those things have mostly been changed out. But if you go into the lobby and look above the registration desk, you can still see those bamboo valances are still there.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So
one job to do. One job.
Who knew incandescent bulbs can dry out bamboo? Mm-hmm. There's another neat feature that was over at the registration desk that's unfortunately been lost to time. But as you're checking in, if the concierge is on your right and you're looking straight to the check-in desk, there used to be a hidden door. So the wall behind was actually paneled. and perfectly cut out in the panel lines was a door, and it was done so seamlessly. When it was closed, you didn't know a door was there. And I remember checking in with my grandparents in the 80s with my parents, and my grandfather pointed out, he's like, there's a door there. I'm like, no, there isn't. And somebody walks through and just pushes that panel open, and sure enough, it just swings open. So it was this magic door. And if you look in the film as well, real quick, it closes just about at the 58-second mark. You can't see it line up perfectly, but you do see the door there. So that was really cool. And just the colors in there too. It was really interesting how, because the ceiling and the bamboo was so natural, and then the tile.
Yeah, the tile.
Oh, the tile.
Oh, the tile. So when you see the movie, I don't think film could really capture the color that was the tile at that time. And all of us have probably seen different photos of it, and depending on the lighting conditions, it looks quite different. But it was this really incredibly vibrant green and blue, throughout the upper and lower floors.
Almost like a light lime green and a coral blue, right?
Yeah.
But they were bright. They were.
Yeah. It seems strange because it was so out of character with everything else. Like you said, everything else is like browns and tans and
right.
So I did some searching around to try to figure out why those colors and where that might have come from.
I only have one guess.
All right, you do your guess and we'll see.
All right. So just looking at this, because don't forget we have the lush green foliage, and the giant planter in the center has a ring of bright coral colored tile as well. And my only thought is that you've got the brown above, you've got the greenery, and that is and the blues and the greens are supposed to represent the water.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
That was my only thought.
I am sure you are right, because so the bottom floor of the Great Sacramento House is called the sea level.
Ah.
And I was going through some catalogs of like Libby glasses from the 1970s. And in 1971, Libby Glass came out with an 8-piece tumbler set called Deep Sea. And it had the exact same two colors on the clear glass. So it must have been a design trend from that time if you're trying to communicate the sea.
And there's only a handful of pictures as well that are showing this, showing the floor. There's one that's been tweeted and copied and scanned countless times, which I believe it's taken upstairs just outside the Coral Isle Cafe. But I've tweeted out too how I go to the office now and then, and one of the tenants in the building there has a floor. And I'll send you guys the picture here. I think you've seen it before, but this is the only floor I've ever seen that can possibly come close to matching. And I walk past that employee rest area, the little kitchen, and boy, that takes me back. Just looking at that,
it's making a comeback.
It's so close.
And
it's even on the angle.
Yeah. The other thing we have to describe is it's a checkerboard pattern.
Yes.
Which is another thing which seems so sort of out of whack with this very naturalistic. But yeah, I think that's it. I think they're trying to communicate the concept of the sea.
Yeah.
Which, for what it's worth, I guess maybe that worked out. I don't know.
Hey, if they did something boring, we wouldn't be talking about it today. So
exactly. It certainly made you stop and look at it.
Yep.
Nobody's going to be talking about the All-Star in 30 years like this, so.
Can you believe they just put one color?
Yeah. Who even know? I don't even know what it looks like now.
In some lockers somewhere or something.
Exactly.
That's theming for you.
All right. So let's see. What else was in the lobby? So today when you walk in, you've got Boutique on your left-hand side. You've got the counters for the registration counter on your right. But back then things were a little different. There's some great pictures that we've seen where they have sort of just these large area rugs off in certain places with this sort of tropical rattan furniture hanging out in it. And then years later, you'll see a lot of pictures of these sort of like blue Addams Family style chairs, like hanging out with tables so you could kind of sit in certain areas. But that was about it for seating in the lobby. It's not like today where there's, tons of seats hanging around. One thing that I thought was really interesting, so that hidden door that you saw, Todd.
Yeah.
Behind the registration desk there, that's not where like the resort ends. There's actually quite a large space back there. So there's like the mail room, the original phone room was back there with like a cashier and the accountant and the general manager. All their offices are back in that area. And
so when you sent in your paper, a room reservation, that's where it went. That's where the magic happened.
And that ran all the way up to where the elevator lobby is. And in fact, some like the food and beverage manager, their office was like behind the elevators. So, very, very, very interesting. And that had one of the weird little things there is like once you pass the registration desk, there was always that like wall with the big glass with the mirror.
Yeah.
That would kind of like, great spot for selfies in 1970. And, I guess the 2000s too, until that recently changed. But downstairs to the left where Boutique is now, that had originally just banquet rooms. They were kind of subdivided into little chunks. So they had names like the Oceania Room and the Micronesian Room and the Polynesian Room. Later on, these meeting rooms are kind of formalized into another smaller restaurant called the South Seas Room. There is, in fact, like a whole kitchen back behind where Boutique is today, and the employees' cafeteria. So when they have to take down one of the restaurants, like when they recently revamped Captain Cook's, they actually opened up the employee cafeteria there for everybody. And you can actually see the entrance to the employee cafeteria. If you go to walk towards the staircase to go upstairs,
you just go straight
down. Yeah, just go straight. It's right there.
I made a point of going to eat in that cafeteria when it was open.
Fantastic.
Just to get the experience.
Cool. And I guess back there is like their locker rooms and where they get their uniforms and stuff like that. So I thought it's always neat to kind of know that there's this other infrastructure going on behind what you see, which is
backstage magic, Hal.
That's right. Now one of the cool things about that South Seas room was that they reused a lot of Raleigh Crump's tikis back in little displays there, and some of the like hanging tiki babies from the Enchanted Tiki room in Disneyland and in Walt Disney World. So when they ended up redoing that, probably in the early 70s, to sort of formalize the South Seas room, they had those little tiki babies hanging from these like sort of like A-frame entrance areas, which is really neat. And then where you walk into Boutique today, there were actually bathrooms there, which they've completely blown away. And then in the corner where the DVC person stands, like hand out information about DVC stuff, there was actually a little store there called News from Civilization. And I think, Todd, we have a picture of that.
We have a fantastic picture of News from Civilization. Now, I sent it out to you guys. Now, first of all, there's some great things in this picture. One, the cord that's draped right across the traffic pattern, where I don't know what people are doing there. Maybe they're vacuuming, but I think that's great. The stamp machine on the left, do you see that? All of the glassware at easy reach for all children to test and pick up. I mean, it's just, and I love how the plush are kind of behind the counter too. Like the toys and things are not out in the open. They've got the newspaper there. I remember my grandfather going up there and buying the newspaper, which was great. But yeah, I remember that place. Now, how downstairs too, there I remember going there with my grandparents, and as you go down the hallway, as if you're heading to past the bathrooms and into Trader Sam's and stuff downstairs, on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, somewhere there used to be a little office you could go in and do ticket exchanges and get your tickets. Where was that?
So later on, some point, I think in the 80s, they actually took News from Civilization and moved it across the hallway into an old telephone equipment room.
Okay.
And that corner, they kind of blew out the wall in that corner where News from Civilization was, and they put a little stand there where you could go and, like you said, make
buy tickets. I remember going there with some extra tickets and turning them in with my grandparents to, so he could buy, save a day or something like that.
Yep. So that's
just held on to them all these years. It would be nice.
And I think at one point there were photos of the luau up against the wall there, and I think you'd make your luau reservations there as well.
Right. It was like an info desk as well. It was almost like a mini guest relations for all things park related. You could get park out. It was really cool.
Yeah. So I remember there's like a little low. When they took out the wall, they end up putting this low planter that had bamboo sides with some bromelates and stuff in there. Yeah, it's pretty groovy. So that's at that point, and then so directly across from that, like I said, at first was nothing. It was a telephone equipment room, but it did have my favorite mailbox. On all of Walt Disney World property, which is this brown mailbox that hangs on the wall, and it's still there today. They moved it over. Right now it's next to the doors that go out to the back, and it's got the Polynesian Maui character on it. But it's the same. We have movies of that mailbox in roughly the same space, and doesn't have the big scratch on it because it was brand new, but it was there, which is pretty great. On the opposite side of the lobby, it was the elevators, exactly like they are today.
Yep.
There was different artwork there. At one time, there was a huge piece of tapacloth there, which is now moved, I believe, upstairs. No, I think it's downstairs in that hallway that kind of leads out to Trader Sam's. But some of the few pieces of Polynesian art were in those areas. There was a huge carving at one point too, which I don't know where it went to.
I remember that. Now, something I find interesting about the design of both the Great Ceremonial House and the Floridian took on the same design is the stairs to get up. It was in the back corner from the monorail. And it's really interesting that I'm wondering what the concept of the traffic pattern flow is. It to entice you to walk past the shops, which obviously on the Floridian and here you goes past the Sundry shop on both places. But the contemporary, as we've always discussed, I can never figure out where the hell I am in that resort. But these, I always found it interesting and yet a little annoying that is it I don't know. Does it get you closer to your room? Does it, I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, for one, it's next to the staircase. It's next to the elevator. So in case of a fire, it's easy to find the stairs in order to get out of there. It's also kind of, because it's off in that corner, there's also that exit that sort of leads out to the other room. So potentially when you come in through that door, that was an opportunity to go up the stairs there. I think they like to put stairs in the corner for some reason.
They do. Even over at the Floridian, there's another set of stairs in the corner. Underneath Misner's,
I mean, I guess really from a layout perspective, it's just kind of tucked out of the way and, not prominent. So maybe that's what it's all about.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was going to say let's go upstairs, but I didn't know if that's where you're headed.
Yeah, we can go upstairs.
All right.
That's fine. Because I love that whole section with like all the bamboo and those three giant tikis up there.
So going upstairs and I remember so many times walking past the Sundry shop and looking in there, my grandmother going in to pick something up that she needed and forgot. And then we'll talk about the Coral Owl Cafe in a minute. But I want to talk about Village Drugs and Sundries, which was the original name. And God, it's gone through so many iterations and names, I think, over the years. But I sent you a picture of this one, guys. Take a look. Again, glassware. I love the random bucket that looks to be catching a leak on the left-hand side there in the foreground. You see that? And then look at the must have been cooler, or the women have some kind of rain jacket type thing. I don't know. That's kind of a leather jacket for the 70s, I guess, maybe. But she's checking out the slides. Look at the slide display.
I was looking at this picture the other day.
Isn't that great? And all the amber glassware. I mean, you just want to go shop there. I could find so much. And it seems to be maps and things off on the left. There's wine in the back. Kind of dark. A very, even with some of these flash going off, very, very dim. So the flip side, to the other side was Coral Owl Cafe, and it was the first place I ever had grits.
There is nothing more Polynesian than grits.
You gotta go out there, South Seas, you got some grits. But I really enjoyed that place. I still enjoy it today. It's Kona Cafe. It was a neat area. And Brian, was it your father took a picture of Coral Cafe, or you have a shot from the inside, right?
It's the only time in my life I ever paid for an individual slide. Was that there was one that went up for auction years ago that was the inside of Coral Isle Cafe looking out, which was so rare because people didn't take photos inside restaurants back then, and certainly never took pictures of their food. But this is like a photograph of like these people were sitting at their table, and they took a photograph looking out into the lobby of the Polynesian, so from the second floor, which is just, it's an angle none of us really see. So
yep.
I have,
and then more of that bamboo was very prominent in there.
Oh
too.
yes,
I remember
and
that.
the light fixtures in there are great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic little.
So that was a traditional coffee shop, like when it opened up. That was, it even had like a little. When you went to pay, you had to like walk up to a little counter
and pay
with the cash register on the way out in order to pay.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we missed that. Actually, one of the things that I was reading in I think David Coeg's Reality Land book is both at the Polynesian and the Contemporary. These were thought to be very high-end hotels, so there was a lot of thought put together about how much seating you needed for like the fancy restaurants, and then of course you wanted to have the coffee shops and stuff just to to supplement it. But what they found kind of early on was that an awful lot of people were basically staying at travel lodges and like little mom and pop hotels, and then they would like blow their wad to stay at the Polynesian. Even though it was only $28, that was still a fairly significant amount. And so they didn't use the fancier restaurants. It's like there was always a line for the coffee shops and the little places, and not so much for the larger dining facilities.
That's interesting.
So they had to kind of like scramble and redo the way that those things were configured to handle the clientele that ended up coming.
And speaking of the fancier dining opportunities, just around the corner from the Coral Isle Cafe was the
Papite Bay Veranda.
Papite Bay Veranda, which was one of my favorite restaurants. I have fond memories of being in there, eating. Thunderstorm outside, pouring rain coming down the glass windows. You looked out, you could kind of see the castle. It was just a warm, inviting place, and I really like it. I don't know, Ohana's is just not my thing. I don't need to spend $65 on 400 skewers of meat every day. But, you can never eat that much food. There's screaming kids. It's just, I have nothing against screaming kids. I have one of my own, but people trying to eat dinner at 9:30 and drag kids in there. It's just ludicrous.
But Stitch will come to visit you during your breakfast.
Good Lord. All right, I could probably give breakfast. I could probably handle breakfast, but
breakfast is nice. I like
but breakfast. If you want to eat at Ohana's, you have to go at 4 o'clock now. So you need the early seating. But how do you remember? I mean, it was a great restaurant. I really liked it.
It was visually it was very different because it was trying to be French Polynesian. So it was more colonial. There was a lot of like white and what I would not think of looking very Polynesian at all. It was more a French colonial style, and the menus and things.
I just went there like 6 months ago.
But that changed see, when I went, it was the later, mid '80s, and I think it had gone more towards Polynesian and more of a American. I don't want to say bistro. That's probably not the right term, but there was a little more steakhouse. I remember getting a fillet there and fishes and things like that. So it did kind of cater to that as time.
Gotcha. I can tell you, I absolutely remember in the 80s, my parents would go to their like maybe once or twice every couple of months to have the Sunday brunch, which was the most incredible. I was not old enough to appreciate it because I just wanted to eat a bowl of Fruit Loops and maybe some oranges or something.
Let's get to the park.
Yeah, it was quite the spread, and I think we found an ad for it or something. It was like $5.50 or $6.
Oh, nice.
Incredible. It was incredible. Awesome. I mean, they had seafood and lobster and like all kinds of. And what was that, like some sort of fruit cocktail that everybody raved about?
Yeah, so I know I talked about this on the food episode, but they said the the fruit cocktail there was like ice cold and the best they ever had. This was a discussion of cast members from back then. They really loved it, and they had prime rib at the dinner buffet, and I guess the brunch one too. And everybody's big fans of the Polynesian back then.
Yeah. So one thing that was a little different was the location of the Tamboo Lounge, because it was still there. That's been a fixture. But if you kind of think about the way Ohana is laid out today, you walk in and the lounge is right there. That area actually did not exist. They actually blew out space upstairs and downstairs, I think sometime in the 1990s, to create the area of the Tamboo Lounge where it is today. Because originally it was actually way back in the back right-hand corner.
Yeah.
So if you think about where the sort of like the fire pit is, that ends, and then there's like a weird little hallway because there's actually a set of stairs that goes downstairs. So on the other side of that wall, the bar was actually set up there and kind of angled out to go on the diagonal. So they had that area, and then you could kind of like step down over a railing, and there was seating against like the glass window. So kind of the way that we saw the pictures upstairs of the top of the world, where there was sort of tiered seating that overlooked the windows. It was kind of set up that same way.
Oh, cool. Now everybody just piles outside. It's a disaster.
Oh, it is.
Oh.
So there was a.
Now they're queuing up on the. Did you see the latest? Sorry to go off on the rail.
No, fine.
The latest queue area, I was in there in September. They start queuing people up in front of where the opposite of the Kona Cafe, in front of like where the Sundry shop is. That's where people are supposed to queue up and check in. It goes the whole length now. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's not that great. But Bobby said they had to do it, so the only reservation they could get was $9.45. The kids are tired, but damned if we're gonna spend our $600 and eat.
So let's see. According to this
End
map,
rant.
So according to this map I had, you could fit back then. You could get 306 people into the restaurant.
Oh,
and you could get 96 into the Tamboo Lounge, which is ironically more than Trader Sam's today. And the foyer only held 19 people. So today, where you kind of walk, where you do finally check in, that was originally where the foyer was, and then you kind of walk down that space where the tikis are kind of set up, and then there's like that strange counter out in front of you. That used to be a private dining alcove, so they had sort of doors that would separate that off. So they kind of blew out that area to make it where you walked in to try to. I think what they really did when they changed it over to Ohana was just try to reclaim as much space as they could.
Yeah.
To get some more people in there. So that's really what it was about. So if you think the dining room was originally held 300 people, if they add that 96 from the Tamboo, they probably blew that out to over 400. So now where do you put 400 people
exactly
waiting to sit down? And the answer is not really anywhere.
Right.
But yeah, there's been a couple of changes. The bathrooms have changed around a little bit. The men's room is still exactly where the men's room was.
Mm-hmm.
I think they actually, so they added the companion restroom, and I think they actually blew out the ladies' room into like a dish storage area and a dishwashing area to try to give it some more space. But it's interesting looking at some of these diagrams of like, again, the whole, backstage, the way that whole thing was configured. It's like you don't know that there's like giant coolers back there, and of course the cooking was all done behind the scenes at that point before they started doing these skewers out in front. So it's really fascinating just how much junk is back there.
Yeah, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
So let's go.
I was gonna say the one thing that we did not mention upstairs was Trader Jack's Grog Hut.
Oh yeah.
which was the liquor where you go buy your liquor, and you mentioned in the photo that you could see sort of like the wine.
Right, it was connected. The two stores were connected.
Right.
Yep.
So that was named after Jack Olson, who was like the buying guy that was in charge of all the stores. So that's who Trader Jack was.
Ah.
And then you might remember in later years there was kind of like a little hut thing in the middle, sort of between the grog store and the Village Sundries that they added. I think that was kind of through the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I do vaguely remember that there. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay, well, we can go back downstairs.
Yeah, we'll go back down the little stairs.
Yeah, so we'll go down the side stairs there, down to the Outrigger Assembly House, which was what that outer building was called. So once you got in there, that's where you would find all the stores. So like the Polynesian Princess, which was the women's shop, that would be basically where the bathrooms are today. When you go to walk into Captain Cook's, that's where those restrooms are. They were reclaimed from that area. There used to be basically like a single men's stall and a single ladies stall in that area, and they blew that out to be a much needed, much larger restroom.
Where was the men's shop? Was that next door?
That was straight ahead. So,
okay.
So when you walk down that hallway now, you kind of take a right to go into Captain Cook's in order to get your stuff, and then there was a seating area to the left where like the posters are now for like the different islands.
Yes.
That was where the men's shop was.
That was the men's shop. Okay.
That was the men's shop.
So the cooking area is now the men's shop.
So the cooking area, so the kitchen is actually still where it always was.
Oh.
So here's where things get weird. So
I'm gonna need blueprints, Hal. I need a flip book of changes.
So Captain Cook's, the kitchen is still exactly where it was before. They just kind of changed the way that you got in there. And originally Captain Cook's wasn't a restaurant. Well, on one side it wasn't a restaurant. That was actually the bar.
Right.
And we've heard all kinds of stories from people about how that was the place to be if you were a cast member. That's where Saltwater Express played.
They were a duo, like a guitar duo, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It was very, very small. But there was a bar there, and that bar backed up against the kitchen, and on the opposite side of that was the Barefoot Snack Bar, which you would enter from the outside.
Right.
So when you were outside the building, kind of sort of in the area where the Pineapple Lanai is now, you could walk into the snack bar and pick up food from that location. And then that all got reconfigured over time into sort of the much larger, Captain Cook's that we have today.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then if you walk down the hallway to where Trader Sam was, that used to be a nursery. So before the Neverland Club, that was the Mouseketeer Village Clubhouse. And they had, music and crafts and a little theater with a little stage. Later on, that became the arcade, Moana Mickey's. I don't know where the changeover to that was, because I know the arcade at one point was over in the Tangaroa Terrace.
Right. It was over there for a while through the 80s, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
But then when it came back, they put it in that space. And sort of down at the end there was where you would rent where you go out to rent the catamarans. It was called the Catamaran Corner.
There we go.
So the boat rental was there, and then sort of on the outside of the building is where they would store like the sails and the oars and the paddles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So today Trader Sam's is pretty much taken over most of that space, and of course the porch is blown out, so you can enjoy the outdoors now.
That's right. That whole hall down there is weird, though. It's just old wall.
Yeah.
It's a little odd.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the big differences back then, there was a lot more glass, both to the outside and then also the inside. So I know we'll have films that people could look at where you kind of walk through some of those areas. I've found some videos online that do a real nice walkthrough. It was not particularly super attractive, but it was certainly functional and a lot brighter than it was now. But I mean, I understand why they closed off a lot of that for Trader Sam's, because with all the effects and things, they needed to make it more of an indoors in the dark experience than a bright experience. So certainly makes sense.
Exactly. Do we talk about South Seas Row? We did, right?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, okay, you got that. Okay.
All right.
I thought so.
And then one little thing that we stumbled upon, which I had to do some digging to try to find, is Brian found a picture of a barber shop and a hair salon at the Polynesian, which I could not find on any of the diagrams. Brian, tell us about the photo, because it is a really funny one.
So it was shared by ex-cast members of the time, and then there was an ongoing discussion about the two barbers and which one each preferred to get their hair cut. And I want to say we figured out the haircuts were $4 or something like that, and the guys all used to, they used to. Well, back then it was. But and then eventually they closed the barber shop and the salon in the Polynesian, and the one barber was working at the beauty salon / barber shop in the Contemporary before they eventually closed that one. Sometime in the 90s, I want to say they closed that one. So, but it was a standard resort thing back then that there'd be a barber shop and a beauty salon, in addition to a lot of these other services that we've talked about.
Yeah, it's funny that I actually went
What a
looking.
steal.
I assumed that there was one everywhere. So I've gone looking for them before, and I was like, oh, they're all the Grand Floridian now. Okay, never mind. So it didn't appear, I couldn't find it in any diagrams or any maps. So I actually just went out one day and started looking around to try to figure out where it might have been. And we found, I think, a copy of Eyes and Ears where it talked about how they had done an expansion and opened up a barber shop. So I knew the expansion was done to the back of the house, and wandering around, I discovered where the barber shop was. And then later on, last week, I actually found some video that showed it. So if you walk out of those doors past Trader Sam's now, there's kind of a building that connects, I guess it would probably be, trying to think it's not Bora Bora. There's another building that's like a straight shot out from the side of the Great Ceremonial House.
Yeah, I'm forgetting the name of it, but yeah, I know exactly where you're talking.
But there's this weird little just single story building there with some glass walls and some doors, and it's just some random offices now, but that's where the barber shop used to be. So it's right directly facing the marina. So if you're at the back of the marina and you see these glass doors, it's like that's where the barber shop used to be. Maybe poke your head and see if someone's got a chair for you.
And maybe how this is a good time to talk about we've talked about valet services and different things, but there were, this really shows that these resorts were catering to be full service. That obviously the barbershop and the clothing and the food and the coffee and the sundries and the liquor sales. One we had a listener write in that wanted to know a little bit about the church services offered as well, because that was something that was part of this resort for quite a number of years before some congregation changes in the area and whatnot. So, yeah, I know you've got a little more information, because I attended a mass once.
Did you?
With my grandmother? Yeah, so we attended.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
I always wanted to go, and I never got around to it. So, yeah. I'm glad that you did. So yeah, we haven't had a chance to talk about the luau yet and the evolution of that. But yeah, once the luau space was built, I think in 1973. There were church services that were put on at the Polynesian.
Yeah.
There were at least 2 Catholic ceremonies and 1 non-denominational Protestant ceremony every Sunday. And actually this ties into like a whole thing in Orlando that everyone has probably driven past a million times on I-4, the Mary Queen of the Universe Church.
Yes.
It all started with a Catholic priest named Father F. Joseph Hart. So he was assigned the tourist side of Orlando in 1974 when the Catholic Church saw a need to sort of service the burgeoning tourist trade. Now, the actual Orlando City Diocese didn't get started until 1969. So I always have to remind people, Orlando was a real cow town until Disney showed up. So, I mean, it literally did not have its own sort of, organizational body for the Catholic Church until 1969. So he started in his parish to service tourists on Hotel Plaza Boulevard. And then as time went on, he ended up getting a deal with Disney in 1975 to start doing services at the Polynesian as well. And then we have to assume that the Polynesian probably reached out to a Protestant minister, so that way, both sides would be served. So it wasn't just Catholic. But it was kind of a really neat arrangement because, I can't think of a more beautiful place to have a service.
Yeah.
And Todd, you said you went at least once?
At least once. I remember, I went with my grandmother. We walked over in the morning, and I remember her, checking the schedule when we arrived and ensuring that she would go to service. And, she had her rosaries and there and everything.
That's great.
So, yeah, it was awesome.
They did collections, and the collections went to whatever the church was that was doing the service. Disney did not get any money, and they did not charge any money for the use of the facilities. It was purely done as a goodwill thing. Mm-hmm. So this Father Frank started collecting money. They bought a piece of property in kind of an out of the way place next to I-4 in 1979, and that property sat for decades as they raised money, and eventually that became the Mary Queen of the Universe Church, which is now by the Orlando Premium Outlets malls that we drive by over and over again. And that went on for years and years. We have a card from 1982. So Protestants, 9 a.m. on Sundays at Luau Cove. Roman Catholics, 8 and 10:15 a.m. And then also on Saturday at 6 p.m. Because I guess some people prefer the Saturday night ones as well. And then they also did them at the Hotel Royal Plaza at 8 a.m. on Sunday, which is just so interesting. This went on for years. Finally, when they actually built the Mary Queen of the Universe Church, that gentleman moved all the services over there and discontinued doing them at the Polynesian. They got some volunteers, some volunteers from the Catholic faith kept going and doing the services there, but they were really trying to get people to go over to the other one. They ended up going from 2 services down to 1 service, which actually ended up sort of like overwhelming the single service. And then by the late 90s, early 2000s, it's like the Protestant services were kind of dwindling. But really what happened was at that time, people were moving to the Orlando area, and really housing developments and just housing in general kind of ended up springing up all along, that side of town. So the cast members, they had regular churches they could go to. Disney ended up setting up Mears buses to take people to the Mary Queen of the Universe. So those services ran from 1975 and then finally ended in 2002. So, but
that's a pretty impressive run, actually, when you think about it.
It's a cool way to spend a Sunday.
Yep.
Well, since we're talking about the luau, I guess we may as well talk about the luau.
That's right.
Or talk about the Luau Cove. So let's talk about what was there not on Sunday. So this is really neat. So I found an article in the Disney News from, I think, 1973 that talks about the background of the luau performers. So you'll see this sort of like this name I saw this name over and over again in like publicity things, the Kauai Pono Polynesian Review. It was actually a husband and wife team. So the wife was, I'm going to make sure to try to say this correctly. The Kauihe Alani and her husband Pono, they were both originally from the island of Hawaii. They heard that Disney was looking to put together a troupe to perform at Walt Disney World year-round, and also the Tahitian Terrace at Disneyland during the summertime and the Christmas holidays. So they actually got a group of people together, mostly students from the Mormon Church College on Oahu. So if you've ever been there and gone to the Polynesian Cultural Center, that is staffed by people of the Mormon faith that are actually brought over from all the islands of Polynesia, which is fascinating. It's, you know, a bunch of college age kids. Literally, a lot of them, it's their first time off of the islands that they grew up on. So they come over to the island of Hawaii. They go to college, and to defray part of their college costs, it's like they go work at this tourist attraction, which is actually fantastic. I love it. We got to go a couple of years ago, and I highly recommend it. But they recruited a lot of the people from there because when they go to that school and they perform at that attraction, they actually have an opportunity to learn about the cultures and traditions of the other islands. So it works out great because the luau show ends up being sort of a combination of the dances from many of the different islands. So I thought that was pretty cool. And they said the troupe actually had more than 100 dances in their repertoire when they started dancing there. For the first 2 years, it was held 3 times a night in the Pipiteve Veranda restaurant, and then when weather was permitting, outside on the beach. So we've seen pictures. I think I've got a nice picture, and I think we've seen some other ones that'll share of the setup outside. It was quite crude. It was really just a bunch of folding tables and chairs, like set up on the beach, right out in front of the hotel. According to the book Reality Land by David Coing, that arrangement became kind of unwieldy due to Florida's unpredictable rainstorms. So you can imagine everybody's getting set up, and then all of a sudden a rainstorm comes through and everyone's got to flee. They would kind of, I guess, move into the second floor of the great ceremonial house upstairs and try to set up something for everybody, but that became kind of a pain. Plus, they discovered if they were doing the shows inside, the people that were there for conventions were just kind of booking the restaurant instead of booking a separate luau. So in 73, they ended up building that separate facility outside so they could run the luau's year round. They eventually installed heaters and put out a full kitchen out there. So that kind of kept the luau going, and it has been going strong. I don't know if it's the same troupe anymore that works on it, but it's been going.
Yeah. It's impressive how long it's been going. I went in 1981. I have some photos. I remember my parents not enjoying the food.
Sounds like you.
And no. It's the. I also went in 1986 or 80. I think it was 89. And that's when they started doing the 2 luau's. They did more of one that was adult themed, and the earlier one was more character themed. And I remember at that one we went to the character themed one. Is that still happening too?
I think they just run a show now called The Spirit of Aloha.
Yeah,
so they do. Yeah,
it's just one. Okay,
yep.
All right. So they've gone back to the single. I know that they have 2 seatings. I think there's usually like a 5 and 8 or something like that. But yeah, you can hear those drums. We had a room at the Floridian in the DVC tower. And I remember we were back the first night we checked in and we going in the background. You could hear it, and we've walked past a number of times. So, but yeah, it is like you said, how it's going strong. And I think I there's a photo of me. I'll have to find it and tweet it out. Standing in 1981 after receiving my shell lay that they would hand out, and they handed the shell lays out for a long time after that. I don't know what is given out now. I think it's just the plastic flowers, I believe.
Yeah, I've seen this sort of like the silky flower ones, I think. I haven't seen one of the shell ones. God, 10 years or so at least.
Yeah. Oh, here's the photos, guys. Don't laugh because the hair is.
Oh boy, look at you! Look like a Boy Scout.
Yeah. And then here's the family. Actually, that's not my grandfather in the picture. I think my grandfather was taking the photo, but there we are. And more amber glasses.
Wow, look at you.
Or that might just be beer. Who knows? and look at that, more bamboo. More bamboo everywhere.
Can't get enough bamboo for my $1.
That's right.
Everything seems so brown.
That was the 70s, my friend.
Yeah, that was the 70s.
It's like, do you guys have brown filtered lenses?
It was more.
All your
it was more of a taupe. I mean, look at the picture.
I've never
look at the picture of me. I'm dressed in brown. I mean,
browns. I've never been to this show. Is it like worth it? Is it a go must see nowadays, or is it?
Now that I think about it, I saw it a third time in '98. It depends. I mean, if it's your style. I mean, the flame, the juggler, or the flamethrower, or Twizzler, or whatever you want.
The fire knife
twirler,
dance.
yeah, the fire knife. There's the machete guy with the knife, with the two knives.
Oh, that sounds cool.
That are hooked together, and he spins those around. There's what I affectionately call the yo-yo dance, which is the
the poi balls.
Yes. Is the poi balls? Okay.
Yeah.
See, How knows all the technical terms. I'm just, it's.
I mean, is it like a little bit of show? You eat. They do some show while you eat, and then
it's all after eat. You eat first, and then the show's going on while you're wrapping up dinner and getting dessert generally. So
okay. But all right, so we go hoop-de-doo, and I've never ventured to that.
Yeah.
one.
Now look at this. Here's a photo from 1981 as well. What about this? There's puppets on stage. Now take a look at that. Do you remember? Do you have any recollection of that?
Huh. Interesting. Nope.
Nope.
I have never actually. I have never actually seen.
Look at that.
So
you haven't seen.
You've
it.
never been?
As many luau's as I have gone to in my life, I have never been to that luau.
Yeah, I've never been.
Is there a reason? Oh, we should do it next trip.
Here's one from '86 with some of the characters. You had I forget his name, but King Louie coming up here in the next photo was in it, and Goofy came out and did hula lessons, I think, with the kids.
Look at that.
And they invite people up on stage too.
Huh. Wow, those are nice headdresses.
Yeah.
They did a good job with the costuming there.
What's interesting is I'd be curious just for fun. Since we've done hoop-de-doo a lot, like the changes over the years in this. I'm sure there's some website devoted to it out there of like the show changes but that stuff's always. Did they get more PC through the 90s and?
Yeah, I mean So as the veteran of many a luau show, you tend to see a lot of the same style dances all the time. Like Todd said, it's like someone will do a fire knife dance. It's like you do that swinging ball dance from New Zealand. There's a variety of ones that you typically, like if you go down to the Mike High in Fort Lauderdale, you see kind of the same kind of show. I think where they vary it over the course of time is kind of in the story that's supposed to tie the dancing together. Because the traditional method is like, someone would get up and stand and then just sort of talk about, from the island of Tahiti is this, and then the person comes out. And I think now there's kind of like this elaborate storyline of a grandmother, and since I haven't seen it, I can't speak to it with any authority. But I think they're trying to wrap more of a story into it these days.
As long as Stitch doesn't come in and crash the party, that's all I ask.
Does he?
I don't know. I haven't been there in a while.
I would assume he would.
I think '98 was the last time I went. So.
Well, they used to like hoop-de-doo. We have pictures of my dad like getting them called up on stage, and they were like hitting him over the head with a rubber hammer. And they don't do that anymore. Like,
well, I guess what we will have to do is figure out what the next time is that all of us will be together, and we will invite our listeners to join us.
Oh, what an event
at the luau, and we'll put together a night where we can all sit together and check it out. Because I'd love to see it.
We'll have a little poi together.
That's right. So my gosh, Todd, there's so much to talk about. I
still want to keep going. I want to keep going. Yeah. It's getting late though.
I mean, just a couple of things I just want to touch on real briefly is all of the signage that was done in the resort, as well as all the artifacts that we saw. Like there's these beautiful bowls and like prows of canoes that were all done by a company called Oceanic Arts, which is still in existence in Whittier, California. Bob and Leroy, they got the contract to do all of the carving for all of the signs. Were originally all done sort of by hand. And in fact, if you go out to their facility, there's one that still hangs in the shop because they changed the name of a restaurant sort of at the last minute from the Bayview to something else. So they have this one sign that they couldn't send to Florida, but they did that gigantic sign for the Polynesian that used to stand outside, which apparently they had carved it in California, like had to put it into pieces and then reassemble it back in Florida. All of the large, like those Hawaiian Hawaiian style tikis that are in the staircase. They did that.
Did they do the totems in Tangaroa Terrace as well?
They did not do those.
Those were somebody else, right?
That was somebody else. And Bob and Leroy did a phenomenal amount of work in there. When you walk around, like all the stuff that's hanging on the walls, all the little boards and things, that was all their work. And a lot of those are actually stock items. So you can actually go out to their place and buy a lot of the stuff that's hanging up in the Polynesian even today.
That's
and
cool.
It's not super expensive. It's, it's not cheap, but it's not a lot. We didn't get to talk about the Tangaroa Terrace at all, which I know served as a restaurant for, 20 years.
Yeah, easily. I know we did talk about quite a bit on the food episode. And we dabbled a little bit into talking about the food that was served there and a little bit about the arcade as well. We didn't talk about my grandparents' favorite longhouse, the pool areas, the original lava pool. There's still a lot we need to talk about and go over. And also the second phase when they brought in what is now Pago Pago and the Tahiti and I think another, and I forget the other.
There's a ton to discuss in detail, and I don't want to, and we still have to talk about the wave machine and all that stuff. So I don't want to hog the podcast for like all year to go over this. So
listen there's a collective groan coming over our fan base.
So we'll probably have to save part 3 for later on and talk about some other stuff. But there's still a lot of history to get caught up on. I mean, we literally got to about 74 or 75 here.
Yeah.
Now, so much more to go.
What we will say is that we are going to put out a small episode probably a few weeks after this. We had a conversation, all 4 of us had a conversation with some individuals who worked at the Polynesian during the opening. And we have some great background stories. We have some people who also worked in Imagineering and did some of the construction and design of certain things that you will recognize today in the resort. And we connected a couple dots too, which was pretty neat. And you will hear our shock and awe in some of the conversation. So we're going to get that edited and put out probably sometime after this. Will be a mini episode. While it does dive into some other areas of the park, of the resort rather, it does certainly focus in on certain things that make waves. And by that, we mean a machine and newness as well. So so we will get to that. Well, how, again, the master of ceremony is the master of all things tiki and luau, as I said in the very first episode when I introduced you, master of all things tiki. Thank you very much for your, as always, diligent research. And I know, as you said, we'll be diving into part 3. We do need to take ourselves away a little bit from Polynesia for a while. So before we, go through our ending things, is there any idea, guys, where we want to go next?
Well, Hal and I want to do some more hotels, but I feel like we need to venture back into the parks first. But we should promise that a Hotel Plaza Boulevard episode is forthcoming.
Yes, with a little preview of the preview center, I think.
Yeah, so if you have memories or input on having stayed at one of the non-Disney owned resorts on Disney property there along Hotel Plaza Boulevard, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, please drop us a line.
All right, guys, so I know a lot of people want, like Brian said, we should probably go back to the parks, and we've talked about Horizons and Journey Imagination. Those are all coming up. We've got a lot of work to do on those. But what do we say we take a trip back to maybe Communicore West or Communicore East? There's a lot in there to talk about that we could easily fill up. All right, well, we'll do that. We'll leave it as a surprise whether it's going to be East or West, because I think each one probably has enough in there for its own episode. And
why don't we have the listeners vote?
Oh, there we go. We can have the listeners vote. So we'll set up a tweet vote, and you can also send your preferences to podcast@retrowdw.com. Title it Episode 38 Choice. How's that? And we'll put you in. Let us know East or West. All right, before we sign off, as always, guys, we have some merchandise we like to let all of our listeners know about. Now, a little thing you may not know is, or if you've been listening to us for a while, you'll notice that we do not have any sponsors. And that is part of our plan, and we're going to continue that promise to you. The only way that we actually get funding is through you, our listeners, and by purchasing some of our merchandise and designs. We like keeping ourselves sponsor and ad-free as much as we can, especially here on the podcast. We want it to be all the way through from start to finish, just us talking and getting you the stories and fun that you want to hear. So with that said, we appreciate any type of support you can give us. So you can see our t-shirts at retrowdw.com/support us. And that will take you to the page where we got t-shirts and mugs and iPhone cases, all sorts of great things, pillows and tapestries now and stickers. How you edit a design last week, you teased us. You said we were going to have a Polynesian design, and you sent in something completely different that threw me for a complete loop. It's awesome.
Yeah. I realized, we don't have anything about the railroad. So no. I did a railroad design because, I think there's a group of people that really, love the railroads.
That's right.
So we needed something for them. But this time, I swear, we did not get to talk about it on this episode. But, one of my favorite little things is the old Eastern Winds Chinese junk. So
yes.
I will be completing a Eastern Winds t-shirt for the people that are fascinated like myself with that wonderful vessel.
Very nice. And as always, we also have the nudist Wave Machine shirt, which obviously it takes it back. And for the railroad people out there, you did the Magic Kingdom Railroad with this one. Are we going to see a Fort Wilderness Railroad come up?
You know what? I think we're going to have to.
Okay. All right. And in breaking news, too, just the other night, Brian, it was Ashley. What is her Twitter? At Mystic Flights?
Oh, Mystic Flights, yeah.
Mystic Flights. She went hiking through Fort Wilderness, and she discovered that there's still track intact way back in the woods. She said it's not recommended that you try it. But she sent along some photos, and they're simply awesome that some of the track and rail bed is still out there. So pretty cool. So thank you, Ashley, for sending that in. Pretty cool stuff. And hopefully we'll have a t-shirt design for that in the near future. So again, check us out at retrowdw.com/support us. And as always, pictures, photos, videos, all sorts of cool stuff at retrowdw.com. We thank everybody for listening. Please, if you can, give us a shout out on iTunes or Google Play or any other review site that you use. Appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you next month when we take you back to one of the Communicores. With that said, thanks very much for listening. And Brian, take us out.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro WDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Retro WDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer Jason Bartel of Deepwater Studios at JasonDWS, our announcer Andre Gardner at Andre Gardner, and follow our hosts Hal Bowers on Twitter and Instagram at GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Kujar on Twitter at LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Brian P. Miles.
Bye.